atibatike zvechopu chopu.
Mutambo uya watsvuka ropa manje muri yeZimbabwe ndadzoka. Ukaona ndakadai so ziva kuti pane zvakawanda zviri kuitika because ndinenge ndauya ndine majoka. Nyaya yanetsa inyaya yezvinhu zviri kuitika. Right now kutaura kwandikuita nemi kuda kwashata Gwirei apinda muCentral Committee umo maaitadzwa kupinda na Vice President Constantine Guvea Chiwenga, but nhasi nyaya hombe iri panapa yandauya nayo yandoda tionesane inyaya yemhinduro dziri kupiwa kuna VP Chiwenga dziri kubva nekuna President Mnangagwa. Madossier makamaona, madossier makamanzwa, madossier ecorruption pachitaurwa zvinhu zvakasiyana siyana. Taiona vanhu vaya vaingouya vachizongodhokonya the likes of ana Mutsvangwa, the likes of ana Daniel Garwe, vakawandisa zvokuti waitoshaura kuti zvivindi zvacho izvi vari kuzvihodha kupi, because isusu taingofunga kuti pamwe ringoriwo dzungu rekuti vanhu vekuti vanenge vachingosapota deep down zvedu, chero isusu tinge tichitoziva kuti ayo uyu kauyu zvaari kutaura izvi zvinhu zvekuti atumwa iri script rakanyorwa iri. Politics idziba dzasvika izveso tasvika pekuti chero nyaya wakambonzwa unoti but iyi nyaya ndinenge takamboinzwa somewhere, chero wakanzwa ichitaurika iko zvinezvi, because pari kunyatsoita kudhereranwa. And the mistake hombe yandiri kuongorora iri kuitika ndeyekuti vakutora VP Chiwenga kumuona kunge mugrade 7. Ndo mistake hombe yandiri kuona iri kuitika, nyaya yekunyanyisa kuunderrate vanhu. Chavaita chavajaira nje kuti vajaira kuunderrate people like ana advocate Nelson Chamisa, kuti vanoziva kuti vakangomuti election tatowina zvatopera vototi what God is in it, anopuwa nyika yacho naMwari utonge, isusu varidzi venyika takutoitonga, iwe chino anopuwa imwe yekutonga naMwari ino. Ndo zvinhu zvavakajaira kuita. It's like that's how they behave. But this time around rekedza tione kuti nyaya inoperera kupi, kuchawira tsvimbo kana kuti dowe, kana kuti kuchawira dowe netsvimbo. Right, rekandangire panapa. President Mnangagwa responded to his deputy Vice President Constantine Chiwenga's dossier, which accused Mnangagwa's allies of corruption, with a 25-page rebuttal laced with phrases such as ignorant, emotional outburst, in denial, immature, and not a good follower, used to describe this expression through curved in rhetorical formality, revealed deep hostility between the two men. Mnangagwa's rebuttal ends with an apparent insult to Chiwenga. The author Chiwenga of the document does not understand the tenets of democracy and the difference between civilian and military conduct, which prompts a reorientation course at the Chitepo School of Ideology for the War Politburo and Central Committee on the supremacy of the party and basics tenets of democracy. Ndo mamirira akaita chinhu chacho apa. So panapa pane kakusaizana kakutarisana kari kungoitika. The document rakamira rakadai so iri. The document under the discussion was presented to His Excellency the President by Vice President Comrade Constantine Chiwenga, who personally took authorship of the same. Consequently, I was mandated to look into the document and come up with a summarized response. As I hereby do in preparing my response, the following legal instruments were examined. 1. Constitution of Zimbabwe. 2. Constitution of Zimbabwe African National Union Patriotic Fund, that's ZANU-PF. Criminal Law Codification and Reform Act Chapter 9 Part 23. 4. Interpretation Act 10 Part 1. Public Entitles Corporate Government Acts. Right. So your excellence, members of the Presidentum and the Politburo, allow me now therefore to present my response in the chronological order in which the allegations were presented in the documents. In my presentation, I will first go through the issue highlighted and then respond accordingly. Paragraph 1. Comrade President, we undertook Operation Restore Legacy with a sacred mandate to reclaim our nation from the jaws of corruption and to restore the dignity, prosperity, and sovereignty of Zimbabwe for its people. Respond. This paragraph seems to be preamble to the document presented to His Excellency the President. It summarizes the events of November 2017 in a manner that, however, evokes emotion in the absence of any consensual background. This is therefore mere political rhetoric and of no consequences. Comrade President, in November 2017, we took a bold and necessary step to remove former President Robert Gabriel Mugabe from power because he sought to manipulate our constitution for personal gain. He allowed certain individuals and family members to seize his executive authority and abuse it. He ignored the suffering of the people while a corrupt elite looted with impunity. He turned ZANU-PF into a personal fiefdom, disregarding its founding values. Respond now. There is no evidence to substantiate the claim of constitutional manipulation by the former president. In fact, there is nothing to indicate that Operation Restore Legacy was done because the former president was manipulating the constitution for personal gain. May I take the opportunity to simplify the concept of constitutional manipulation? Constitutional manipulation entails amending, altering, or repealing the constitution in a way that benefits the individual or his or her allies. The only amendment affected to the current constitution during the tenure of the former president was the amendment of section 180, a provision which deals with the appointment of judges. This whole paragraph regrettably portrays the late former president, may he so rest in peace, as the manipulator and chief perpetrator, yet he was a victim of manipulation by certain named individuals who followed due to the process were later charged for their alleged criminal activities. To sum up this paragraph, I submit that Operation Restore Legacy was about removing alleged criminals around the former president. The late consequently resigned, having taken into consideration the circumstances of the moment and the will of the people. Denigration of our founding father or those who came before us is not only disrespectful but also reprehensible. And paragraph 3, during November 2017, we risked everything, our lives, our freedom, our future, to restore and defend our legacy, the party and the constitution. Respond. It is denied that only few individuals, particularly the writers of the document, sacrificed their lives for the attainment of Operation Restore Legacy. Zimbabweans from all walks of life rose and participated in and supported Operation Restore Legacy. Let us acknowledge the collective effort that made Operation Restore Legacy possible and desist from claiming heroism for work done by men. There is no denying that Operation Restore Legacy had significant backing. A considerable amount of resources was invested to guarantee its success. It is unlikely that an operation of this scale could have achieved its goals without substantial financial support. From the record, Mr. Kodakwashi Tagwirei put in a total of 5 million liters of fuel, food, and other provisions for soldiers as requested by the Comrade General Chiwenga. Furthermore, he put in 1 million liters of fuel and $1.6 million to the party. Therefore, the success of Operation Restore Legacy cannot be attributed to a few individuals. Any such assertions are aimed at distorting the historical narrative for personal and political gain. Issue. Today, history repeating itself in most shameful way. Comrade President, why we find ourselves in this situation is both shocking and shameful. Respond. In order to arrive at appropriate comparison of the two scenarios of 2017 and today, it is important to profile the state of the economy as of November 2017 and to date. Issue. Comrade President, on several occasions and even abroad, you have informed the nation that you are a constitutionalist, and yet it is now clear for anyone to see that the so-called 23rd agenda to extend your term of office is real and alive, and this has now taken us back to the ills that lead us to November 2017. Respond. Indeed, the president is a constitutionalist who was not deviated from the constitution at any time. However, if the people have spoken, should the president disregard the will of the people? This time around. Okay, the author is patently disregarding the resources and seems unaware of the provisions of Article 6, Section 34, subsection 2 to 5 of the party constitution, which outline the powers and function of the National People's Conference. The conference is mandated to review, evaluate, and supervise the implementation of resources and programs of the Central Committee, National People's Conference, and Congress make resolutions for implementation by Central Committee, declare the president of the party elected at the Congress as the state presidential candidate of the party, and exercise any such powers and authority as may be incidental, therefore, moving forward. Issue. Moreover, the drivers of the so-called 2030 agenda have now made corruption, looting of our state coffers, and bribery of our structures the cornerstone of the contribution to the campaign, and this is now destroying our party and violating our constitution. Respond. This is false and malicious. Resolution number 1 was passed in the presence of the author. It is therefore shocking and of concern that he is agonizingly trying to distance himself from a party resolution to which was party by calling it the so-called 2030 agenda. Issue number 7. We are witnessing in shock as some of our officials in the party and government have now become a law unto themselves and are even announcing to our people at gatherings that we no longer holding elections in 2028. These are critical announcements on matters that we as President and the Central Committee have never discussed, nor did we pass a resolution at the last 2022 Congress. Respond. The author is clearly ignorant of party progresses. Every year after a conference, the party mandates its officials to report back to the people on conference resolution per the party's constitution. There is nothing amiss about this announcement, as the message is consistent and resonates with the conference resolution number 1. In fact, what is shocking is that the author of this document is in denial and is not moving with the party. On the contrary, the 2022 Congress declared Comrade Dr. Mnangagwa as the party's president candidate for the 2023 harmonized election, and the resolution still stands. Another issue, number 8. The reality which is clearly emerging is that the 2030 agenda is being funded and driven by non-criminals who have brazenly looted our state coffers with impunity and are now using these resources, whose capture and control of our party is unprecedented and deeply worrying. Response. Again, the denial narrative of the conference resolution and the lack of appreciation of the ZANU-PF constitution procedure is apparently in this paragraph. The author is handed by any thought of the implementation of this critical party resolution. Issue number 9. We surely cannot fold our hands and watch these criminals like Kuda Kwasheta Gwirei, Wikino Jovayo, Scott Sakupkanya, and Delish Nguwaya, amongst others, corrupt and bribe our structures and in the process destroy our party. Respond. This is a reckless statement coming from the author, who is expected to appreciate the due process that ought to be followed before one is labeled a criminal. What is emerging from this narrative is a trend of attacking the president through certain individuals. One would assume that due process is a given at the author's level. What is interesting is that the targeting liberally omits some notorious alleged smugglers such as Simon Redland and Zunid Mott, among others, who are alleged to be associated with some members of the Presidium. Issue number 10. Comrade President, these criminals and their associates have been engaged in brazen and systematic campaign and stealing from our government, and to date they have stolen more than 3.2 billion of government funds through the stealing of our 1.9 billion from the Ministry of Finance to Kudakwashi Tagure for selling 35% stake in Kuvimba Mining House, the stealing of assets like Sandawana Mines and the Zimbabwe Defense Forces, Great Dyke investment by Kudakwashi Tagure, and inclusion of these assets in his fraudulent stealing of our 1.9 billion, 10.3, the stealing of consignment by Kudakwashi Tagure of the party 45% stakeholders in Sakura Holding held by Mvuto Investment Limited, an investment vehicle of the party held through our National Reconstruction Group, which was purchased in November 2013. The stealing by Wikino Jovayo of 45 million of our country from the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. The stealing by Wikino Jovayo of state funds more than 193 million from our government coffers through one bank in our country. And we know that he has stolen some horrific amounts from our government coffers through other banks in our country. The stealing of more than 800 million from government coffers by Scott Sakupkanya through the so-called God incentive scheme, which has now been made into a target fraud. The stealing of 162 million of public funds by Delishingwa through his irregular and inflated Geopomona contract with the city of Harare. The stealing of more than 60 million of government funds by Delishingwa through his irregular and inflated Clean Planet Resources contract with the Ministry of Health. Response: this is clearly a narrative to discredit individuals who has been supporting the party for a long time and are now still doing this same. Zimbabwe is a constitutional democracy with well-established institutions to deal with such matters. Individuals have no legal mandate to go behind their perceived competitors, investigating their day-to-day activities with a view to satisfying their own personal ego. Whilst I do not have the mandate to investigate these allegations, I have nevertheless taken it upon myself to establish the basics upon which they were made. Paragraph 11, moving on. I think I have to come back and finish this whole thing cause chakareba chinhu, but achandiri kuda kungavhedha nchekuti vanhu vasazosvika pakubatwa nehope, but I have tried my level best kuti tikwanise kunge tichiita se tichionesana zvinhu zvinenge zviripo paground. But muri Zimbabwe nyaya iri apa ine andiri kungoona nyaya yekungoti issue yese iri kungorezwa kunzi tagure adai parobva pabuda pachipindurwa. Inini zvangu honestly I didn't know, because nyaya yakunetsa manje makada kuzvitarisa panapa ka vakomana vari kuda kuedza kuprova a point yekuti onaika in 2017 takachimhanya chinhu ichi, takaita cool, takariska life dzedu zvikanzi aiwa unoriska wega, wakariska nemazimbabweans vakatouya vakariska futi plus the likes of anata gure vamuri kushora hanzi vakaisawo petrol fuel chaiyo necash mari yazvaidiwa zvese kuarmy kuti zvinhu zvitese zvinge zvichifamba. Mamwe maissues ari kubuda achitenderera iko zvinhu izvi. Saka nyaya iyi yakutonetsa ndakazvitarisa inini, because pari kunzi vamwe vakaisa mari, imi makangobudikira paground makangodhimanda zvamaingodawo mukapuhwa, muri kuzviona. Ende pamwe mamwe maissues ari kubva arezwa kuti ndingakabamba rekati zonzi aiwa wakutodzikisira vamwe vanhu iwewe varimo mupati. Ndo mamwe maissues ari kunetsa panapa. Zvikanzi aiwa but ko nhingi iwana koingaone paipa pakazonzwa isoka constitution zviri kuzodai zvonzi aiwa unyasoziva nezveconstitution iwo ponzi aiwa but paipa yakapa makuti constitutionalist makubuda zvikanzi president is the constitutionalist, but wanaka iwo problem iripo ka ndeyekuti iwo wonga uripo pakapaswa resolution number 1, saka unofanira kupedzera neresolution kuti uyu anzi ari kuti constitutionalist uda kuti arambe rezvekutaurwa nevanhu. Muri Zimbabwe ndakazvitaura kubva kudhara zvinhu zvese zvikuitika izvi, hapana chinyowani baba. Ndakazvitaura ndikati ndo maitikira yazvichaita, but nhasi look where we are, ndo maitikira yazvakutoita. Ukada kuti vanomuda nestatement rakadai ari kupindura nerakadai so, ndo pari kuzobvunza vamwe vakuti what exactly is the way forward. Way forward mese munoiziva pari kupisa, isu hatingambokwanisa kudairira kuti way forward chakati. Muground muri kudikitira varume vakuru, handisi kuziva kuti zvichapera sei. But I am glad kuti ndakwanisa kuuyawo ndichitaura nemi muri Zimbabwe pa issues akadai so ari kuitika masanganirana ndaita nadzo. Ndichadzoka nepart 2 zvangu takunyadzopedzisa kuona kuti mastatement acho ari kutaurwa ese ipapo ndeapi.
Kulian TV team BAT asi vanhu vachishamsika. Kulian TV haichadzika, saka subscribe wozolaika uchawana zvisapana chichazosha. Everybody say Kulian yeah. Information need brilliant, yeah. Everybody say Kulian.